Yeah, Ali Madad, and welcome to this Dr. H's today's session. Today is the 12th of July, 2021, and it is 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And today's topic is Connecting with the Spirit, Part 1, a Practical Approach. And that approach is going to be practical, as you know. So Dr. H will guide us through all the steps that you may wish to take on this quite difficult path at times to make your spiritual connection. So Dr. H, if we could go to the next slide. And just to give you our participants an overview of what Dr. H will speak about today, there will be a section on the self-inquiry, knowing yourself, and knowing the relationship between the mind, the body, and the spirit, and connecting with this path of light, harmony with nature, and then the practical approach, very, very systematic in terms of hints to practice so that we could connect with this path. So we are ready to do this presentation to you for today. There is a Gnan attached to our presentation. You know that we normally start the thing with the session with a Gnan, but today we're making a little bit of a difference. What we're going to start with is Mola's words from a speech that he made at Brown University. And so I'm going to ask Nusri to play us this video clip today to start our session off. So Nusri, if you could play that, if you're ready.
In the United States, at places like Brown, you were very gracious in your remarks talking about Brown University. One thing you know is that many people in the U.S. have a very limited understanding of the culture of Islam. And, you know, question is, what can universities do to remedy this lack of understanding? And, you know, you think about introducing things like Islamic art and architecture and humanistic scholarship. How do you see introducing those in the West and supporting that?
Well, I've done some work, obviously, with American universities. I have a program of architecture at Harvard and MIT. We have a program here at Brown. So we're working with individual U.S. universities and Canadian universities. We're also opening an Ankan museum in Toronto at the end of the year, which will be
French bread then.
Museum entirely dedicated to the arts of Islam.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So that's going to be important. And we're looking about bridging universities with our own universities across frontiers, with faculty and students, etc. And the basic goal is to make the civilizations of Islam part of global knowledge. That's really the most important thing.
Right. Well, I'm glad we can participate in that, and that we have. It's been a good partnership. So more broadly, what role do you see for Brown and other research universities in America in improving the quality of life in the developing world? I mean, you're doing so much. What can universities do to improve the quality of life in developing countries? It's a big...
That's asking what I'm going to ask you to do in the future.
Okay. Fair enough.
But joking apart, you know, your universities have carried forward a long tradition of concentration of research and knowledge. And it's not a part of Western civilization only. It's been part of Islamic civilization for centuries and centuries also. But as your world has become more developed, economically more powerful, you have concentrated more knowledge, more research in the West than we have been able to do elsewhere. And just as you pinched Plato from Arabic, so we intend to pinch knowledge from you today.
Fair enough. Very good.
Really, I think there are two goals. One is, first of all, to gain in knowledge, but also to reposition our human capacities so that we are able to compete, and I don't like the word compete, but function more constructively in the world.
Mm-hmm. Good. So we have time for one final question, and this is a broad one. We have many students in the audience. They're looking forward to making a difference in the world. That's a very distinctive feature of Brown.
Good.
So you get to give them advice. And, you know, what advice, seriously, would you give them about shaping their futures and their children's futures?
Difficult question.
Yeah.
Well, I think I would start by saying something very basic. First of all, what language do you speak? Do you speak one or do you speak several languages? If you speak several languages, your horizons are wider. You can function in a wider number of countries around the world. I think the second thing I would say is I would ask them to think about where they want to be when they're 35. What are the goals for their midterm? I think that's the second thing I would ask. The third thing I would ask is, do you want to be a global citizen or do you want to be a continental citizen? If you want to be a global citizen, then prepare yourself for that. It's a different set of goals. So I think the whole issue is a rational issue that well-educated children, young people, can address in a very, very rational way. And I think the final thing I would say is everybody makes mistakes. Never regret them, but correct them. But there's no such thing as a perfect world or a perfect life.
Very good advice.
Well, that was this very excellent speech made by Mola at Brown's University, and very much in depth. So it's that time again to invite Dr. H. Dr. H is there with us today, of course. And so I'm going to invite him to come on and make his presentations today to us. So welcome, Dr. H.
Thank you.
I've read the overview of your session, so we welcome your remarks. Dr. H, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sahir. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, all the team members. What an amazing video of our beloved Imam. And wasn't that something amazing when Maula Bapa says to the world, you know, that you pinched Plato from Arabic. And I think those of you who know what that refers to, because remember, the writings of Plato or the philosophy of Plato is one of the bedrock of Western intellectual inquiry and Western intellectual philosophy. In fact, the great American philosopher Alfred North Whitehead, he once said that all the philosophies that came after Plato are nothing but footnotes to Plato's philosophy. And some of you may know that Socrates, as Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam mentioned in his memoirs, Socrates was a prophet in Greece. And many people don't know that. Many people recognize Socrates as a philosopher, but he was actually a prophet and a philosopher in Greece. And everything that Socrates taught was written down by Plato. So you can see the roots of Plato, the Platonic philosophy, if you like, coming from the prophetic roots of Socrates. And this is significant because when you look at, as I said, Western intellectual philosophy, or Western philosophy generally speaking, especially expanded and based on Plato, then that came from Socrates in Greece, who was a prophet. So when Maula Bapa says that, you know, in the Western world, they pinched Plato from Arabic is because way back then in history, the works of Plato, the philosophy of Plato, the books of Plato were translated from the Greek to Arabic. And then it became translated from the Arabic to Latin and other languages. Even the work of Aristotle, many of them were lost to the world, but they were maintained in Arabic translation. So this comment that Mola Bapa made was really amazing. One short sentence, but it's telling the world, you know what? You took whatever you knew about Plato from Arabic, but now we are taking from you what you have developed. So it was an exchange of knowledge kind of thing. Very, very interesting. And I think the rest of the comments made by our beloved Imam was understood in the terms that he mentioned. As explained by Zahir in my presentation today, somewhere in between, perhaps earlier than later, I'm going to request Salma to come in to recite those two parts of Ginan that are connected and that are relevant to my lecture today. So you already know the title of the lecture, which is Connecting with the Spirit, and it is a practical approach. Why I say practical? Because the idea behind this lecture is to be able to take information that you can put into practice. The practical approach means practice. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't use philosophically, intellectually, some other concept for you to think. But the idea more specifically is put it into practice. And I will give you some hints and clues from the teachings of our beloved Imam, particularly Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam. And you will then look at how that expands into the time that we are living today. Well, the first thing I'd like to get out of the way, because I believe the idea of connecting with the Spirit means you need to have clarity how to go along and make that connection. But how will you make that connection if you have some obstacles in front of you? So let's get some of these obstacles out of the way, and then we can come to the core of what is intended. Well, one of the things that we all realize as human beings, that emotion is a huge part of our personality. Emotion is a huge part of your personality, and emotion can act as an obstacle, and emotion can also act as a bridge. That depends how you intend to use your emotion, or how your emotions are using you. So the idea behind getting emotion out of the way is this. For most people, emotions dominate the thought process. It's unfortunate, but it's a fact. For most people, emotion dominates the thought process. Now, underline the word dominate and underline the word thought process. Because if you're going to make a connection, you need to use both your emotions and your thought process. But in this particular case, when I'm referring to emotion dominates the thought process, I'm saying that because most of your thinking is emotional. Most of your thinking is emotional. Unfortunately, if you get carried away with emotions, you will be blown away, carried away, if you have no control over your emotions. The point is, if you want to connect with the spirit, take charge of your emotions. I repeat, if you want to connect with your spirit, take charge of your emotions. If you don't, as I mentioned, you will be blown away like the wind blows away a leaf or a piece of paper. That's what emotions do. So the idea is to take charge of your emotions. And if you do not take charge of those emotions, emotions will take charge of you. So that's a very important consideration. Otherwise, there will be instability. The other thing is this, speaking about emotion. Are you a victim of negative emotions? Are you suffering from negative emotions? Are your emotions out of control because they are negative? Is negative emotion the mainstay in which you react to things? Remember, negative emotions come from toxic thinking, toxic thoughts, toxic thinking, toxic thoughts. And these toxic thinking, these toxic thoughts, in our Gnans, our holy peers have categorized them into five major group of negative, destructive, explosive, negatively emotional thinking that feeds negative emotion. And those five groups, you have heard of them: Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Mad. Now, I am not going into all the details, but I mention it because in the Gnan today, which Salma will recite, in the second part of the Gnan, these are mentioned. At least the two major ones amongst the others. So, the unfortunate part about these negative groups of thinking, which perpetrates, which activates, which sets in motion negative emotion, they come from these toxic thoughts. This is why a minute ago I said you have to take charge. Okay? Now, what is one of the motivation I can give you practically why you need to take charge? Why is it not okay to have these toxic thoughts? Remember what I mean by toxic thoughts? This whole idea of Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Mad, right? So if you become a victim of these five group of toxic thoughts, your emotions are going to be very negative. And what is a motivation, I'm telling you? You see what happens in the mind when you keep feeding the mind with these toxic thoughts, and the mind reacts by generating negative emotions. Guess what? Information that you receive becomes blurred. It becomes distorted. You know why? Why does information becomes blurred? Why does information becomes distorted? Why is your judgment, when I say judgment, I mean your ability to reason, your ability to look at things intellectually. What happens? It becomes distorted. It's like, if you have a beam of light and you put a dirty lens, what happens on the other side? You don't get the same light. You get distorted light. You get light that's become dirtied, if you like, contaminated. So what happens? your mind does not have clarity. Your mind is not clear. Why? Because of these toxic thoughts that generate negative emotions, right? So you have to take charge. And how do you take charge? Well, there are different ways that you can do. You can do yourself a favor by taking charge. But let me ask you this. Are you able to learn to handle your thoughts process, your habits of mind, your habits of emotion, and the power of your will? This is important, the power of your will. So learn to handle your thought process. Learn to handle the habits of your mind, the habits of emotions, through the power of your will to begin with. And remember, one other thing that I have to add here, that these toxic thoughts that creates negative emotions create what we call compulsive habits by careless living. They become compulsive habits. And compulsive habits are very irritating. And it could be that you do certain things because your mind is so distracted, you are not able to focus even for 30 seconds in one activity. So you become sloppy, you become careless, you become unattentive, and one can go on and on about these, but it's called compulsive habits. So, for example, people open a door and then they never close it. People I'm sorry to bring this frivolous example, but they are really down to earth example for people who need to know. It's like, people who put a light on and then they never put it off. They think somebody else will, or they think the light will go off by itself, or maybe they don't think at all. It's a compulsive habit by careless living. So why is that? Why do people do that? You put on a stove and then you don't switch it off. The food gets burnt. What happens? So you did one good action by putting the stove on, then you disappeared, and where did your mind go? Did you not think there will be somebody, or the food will be burned, or maybe there'll be a fire? What happened there? What happened to your thinking there? This is compulsive habit by careless living. So the idea is learn to handle your thought process, your habits of mind, your habits of emotion, and the power of your will. So there are three things in this regard that you need to be able to. I'm just getting the Ginan ready because I would like the Ginan to be recited in a moment. So let me just conclude this part. There are three things, or if you like, three aspects of taking control of yourself if you want to improve the quality of your reaction and mind and the quality of the input that you give to yourself in terms of information and thinking that comes to you. The first one is the power of concentration. Do you see where this is coming from? You have concentration maybe momentarily. Like I said, put the switch on, leave the stove on, keep the stove on, open a door and don't close it, open a window and don't close. These are the things that are part of compulsive habit. Now, these are simple, but there are very destructive habits also. For example, when anything comes to you from a third party in terms of a conversation or habit, you immediately become hostile. you immediately react in a negative way. There is no clarity in the mind. There is no clear thinking in the mind. Your reaction is guided by your emotion. Your negative emotions have taken over. So you can't see that reality. The other thing is, and again, I mentioned that by way of example, if you desire something, and let's say it did not happen the way you wanted it, what happens? You get into a bad mood. You throw a tantrum like a 6-year-old, like a 4-year-old. You know, if they don't get their toys, they become angry. They throw a tantrum. And then a mother has to correct the 6-year-old and said, no, you can't have your way. Because remember, a 4, 5, 6-year-old, the emotional reaction, not the thinking. Why do we say 6-year-old? Because their thinking isn't developed. And they are completely guided by their motor and emotional needs at that time. So they will throw a tantrum. Are adults any different? No. Many adults have not learned to control the negative emotions. As a result, when it comes to this material action and reaction, they throw a tantrum. They become upset. The mood becomes negative, and then they create a scene. You know, I am merely telling you and sharing with you information based on practical observations after years and years and years and years of seeing people and their behavior and more. So, why am I telling you all that? Because unless you know these, it'll be very difficult to control yourself in order to turn your thoughts and your focus to connect with the spirit. Okay, so today in this lecture, I am laying some foundation. It is not the end of the lecture today. There'll be a lot about the connection, but more so in terms of laying the foundation, because it could be that I may have a follow-up lecture next week on this one. But right now and today, I want to really, really emphasize that are you serious about connecting with your spirit? Then you need to bring at least these 3 elements in control. Number 1, as I said, the power of concentration. Now, many people have that concern. Many people have that problem. And they say, well, we can't concentrate. And you may be right. And there is a reason. And why is that you can't concentrate? Why? Because something is distracting, taking you away from the concentration factor. Is it that you can concentrate on what you want, but when it comes to other elements, you cease to have that ability to concentrate? Now, let me give you a clue right here. When I say concentrate, is concentration not an aspect of making connection? Is it not? You make connection with that object, with that photograph, with that idea, with that thinking. You make connection. You are using the ability of your mind to make that connection with that item, and that connection and the time you are able to stay connected is in a way referred to concentration. Now, what has enabled you to make that concentration? And why is it you may not be interested to make that connection in the sense of concentration with something else? Obviously, there is an element here that we may call decision making, which is the second element. So you have decided to allow your mind to get fixated, to make that link with that object. And when I said decision making, you are using the ability of your will, the power of your will to say, this is what I want to concentrate on. So if you take the picture of someone that you love, the lover to his beloved, and the beloved may not be in front of them physically, but there is a picture. Everything drops and you can concentrate on your beloved. And now your mind is shut to everything else. And we all know that from experience. So you are using the power of your will, the power of decision making. So the first one was the power of concentration. The second, the power of decision making. Now, I'm being simple right now because I don't want to spend the rest of my lecture going through all of these. But I think as we may have a follow-up lecture, we may. So I'm taking just a little time so that we are on the same page and we understand what it is. Now, when it comes to decision making, what are some of the elements that helps us guide our decision? Is it not knowledge, information? Is it not the ability for you to determine what information came to you so you can make a decision about that information? Is it or is it not? So you think about yourself in that way. What's the difference when I speak about emotion? When I speak about emotion in this regard, it's not saying, how do I feel about this? That's your emotion. Yes? Now, if you happen to have a negative feeling about someone, about something, right? So your emotion now is guiding you, not your thinking, not your logic, not your reason, but your emotion is guiding you. You have a negative feeling. You don't have the facts. You don't have the information. You don't have the data. But immediately your mind jumps into that emotional frenzy, right? And then what happens? Your logic, the data, the information kind of is pushed on the side. Or when you look at the information, you look at the data, you look at the facts, they appear to you distorted. And you start creating scenarios in your mind that don't exist because of the distortion. Because of the distortion. This is why the ability to make decision is a very important one. So if you happen to be the one who has decided to take control over your emotion, then you have to say to yourself, use this sentence, hold fire and think. Okay? So say that to yourself, hold fire and think, meaning, wait, ask yourself, what is the data? What's the information? What are the facts? Before I react, before my emotion takes over. If you don't do that, God help you. God help you. Because then you are blown away by your negative emotions, by your negative thoughts, and you never have clarity. And imagine, if you cannot make connection with these at this level, how will you make connection with your spirit? That's why it's so important. The third element in this equation is the power of your action towards others. Yes, I mean towards others. It's called the power of unselfish actions. You know, when you perform actions that are unselfish, that are non-selfish, meaning you do not put yourself before others, that is not what Islam teaches us. That is not Islamic brotherhood and sisterhood. That is not what our tariqah teaches us. That's why we are called the Jamaat. That's why we are called a brotherhood. That's why we are called an ummah. So what happens is this, that we have to get away from the principle of being individualistic. You know, in the Western world, there is often this conception to say, well, I need to take care of myself first before I think of anybody else. Now, no one says you shouldn't be taking care of yourself. Of course you should. But there is a balance between becoming selfish and drawing that line and then becoming unselfish. And it's very important. This is what Maulana Bapa says to us, the principle of social conscience in Islam, and that is, use what you need, share what you have in excess. Now, this is not only to do with material resources, it has to do also with what you do with other people. In other words, actions that are unselfish. Now, a lot can be said about it, but I hope you understand it. And, you know, we have a big agenda today, so I really need to kind of move forward to that. So, at this stage, I'd like to request Salma to please recite 2 verses of the Holy Ginan, ABDUL, Man Jite, Man Icha Fal Upaje. So, you know, this Ginan, you can see, speaks about the word man. Stuff that I just said about the mind, but now this Ginan will help us make a transition, cross the bridge between these notions of the mind and connection with the spirit.
So Dr. H, if you could pick up the slide, I will read the translations for the Ginan first.
Sure.
And then Salma will recite. So the Ginan verses that Salma so kindly is going to recite for us are from the Holy Ginan Abudu Jit Man Acha by Pir Hassan Kabirdin, verses 1 and 2. So if verse 1, I would read the translation for this one. O slave, when anyone conquers the mind, thought currents, his mental desires are fulfilled or attains the fruits of his desires without indulging in them, and by conquering the body, sense perceptions, spiritual energy is available. When a person conquers both of them, mind and body, completely, he attains constant joy. This is indeed the state of maturity, ripeness of worship. And now verse 2, O slave, when a worshipper conquers his lust and anger, he then becomes truly holy. When the consciousness, matters of the mind, is conquered, it becomes pure and shines like the moon. It is then that the aspirant, sadhu, becomes stainless. So Salma will now recite the Ginan for us. Salma, it's all yours.
या अली मदद ईद मुबारक साली इमाम डे मुबारक सबका बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अबदू मना जीते मना इच्छा फला उपजे अनेकना जीते उचरागा आहार तो जीते Isabira Choga Pachanda Isabira Choga Pachanda Padu Isabira Choga Pachanda Abdul काम क्रोध जब जीते जोगी सतप पीतरा तब होई जीता जीते चंदा होवे निरमला निरमला साधु सोही अबदु निरमला साधु सोही निरमला साधु सोई अबदु निरमला साधु सोई
Thank you very much, Salma. That was just beautifully sung. Thank you so much. And now, Dr. H, back to you.
Thank you, Salma. It's a very beautiful and very important Gnan to give us a very good and clear understanding about connecting with the spirit. We've only taken 2 verses here in the interest of time, but it's a pretty long Gnan, and these other verses are so informationally laden that it is unbelievably beautiful when we look at what these verses have to teach us. So just a point of note, and in this first part of the Gnan, you can see words that you may recognize. If you can follow my cursor, it says man jite, man icha fal upaje. So it speaks about conquering. Man jite is conquering the mind, and then the desires are fulfilled through that conquest. But these are not related to material desires. Remember that. Okay? So just bear this in mind, and then we will come back to it. And then it speaks about conquering the body. So the body is, if you like, the outer stations of the mind in the material world. That's how you identify the body-mind complex. And here in this Gnan alone, this one verse, the whole dynamics of the body-mind complex is given by Pir Hassan Kabiruddin sallallahu alaihi wasallam into this one verse alone. And then the Holy Pir says, when a person conquers both of them, he attains a kind of joy, hardo jite anand upaje. The word anand is here, some kind of bliss, some kind of reaction happens. And this is not a temporary bliss. It is the kind of bliss that is not explainable with physical, that is, it's not mental, it's not physically, it is bodily, it is something of a spiritual nature. And then the second verse speaks about, now, Abdul literally, of course, means slave, because from its root meaning, but actually it refers to the devotee. One who is devoted to the holy Imam is known as Abdul. But literally, it can be said, or slave. So it says, and look at the words, Kam, Krodh, Jab, Jite. You see, this is the category of thought I mentioned earlier on. There are 5 of them: Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Mad. But these 2 are really, really, as others, as important. But these 2 are very difficult ones to people for them to control. So Kam refers to the whole category that comes under animal passion, lust, negative sexuality, and all of those things. Krodh refers to anger and everything that anger gives rise to. So the Holy Pir says, when a worshipper conquers his lust and anger, he then becomes truly holy. So the notion of purity is dependent on the conquest of Kam and Krodh. And then in this particular part, the same part 2, but the extension of the Gnan says, and this is a very important term, Chit Jite, Chanda Hove Nirmala. Chit refers to the notion of your awareness or consciousness. You know, we have a Gnan that begins with Sat, Chit, Anand. And this is the word Chit. And the Holy Pir says that when consciousness becomes illuminated, when this consciousness is conquered, it becomes pure and shines like the moon. It is then that the aspirant becomes stainless. Now, I can give you extensive commentary on these aspects, which is not today, simply because this was intended to open the gate, open the chapter for you, so that you can down the road, I'll stop sharing my screen, you can down the road continue to explore this. But to put it simply, what have the mystics told us, if I can summarize that? They say when the mind becomes purified like a mirror, when the mind becomes purified like a mirror, knowledge is revealed in it. Are you following me? I want you to make the connection, back to connect. Connect to what I said earlier on. When the mind is cluttered with these toxic thoughts that create negative emotions. So when the mind it becomes purified, this is not the opposite, purified like a mirror, what happens? Knowledge is revealed in it. So if the mind is not purified, the mind has become dominated by negative thoughts, toxic thoughts, negative emotion, animal forms of behavior, and so on. What happens? That kind of knowledge cannot come into the mind. And if it does, it's not going to be recognized, and it's going to create distortion, and it's going to create blurriness. So the mystic says, care, therefore, be taken to purify the mind, right? And you know, this is an aspect of our tariqah when our beloved Imam tells us, keep a clean heart and a pure soul. Keep a clean heart and a pure soul. Very important. If you want to make the connection, you need a clean heart and you need to purify your soul. So how should we do this? Well, as part of a practical hint, remember, we are focusing on practice. Now, I've already mentioned matters related to the mind. Remember, the first one is power of concentration. Number 2, power of decision making. Number 3, the power of unselfish action. Now, here is a further hint for you to actually put that into practice. This is a very important equation, if you like, of action. As we believe, so we act. As we act, so we become. When you believe something here in your mind, you will act accordingly. As we believe, so we act. As we act, when you act, so you become. So be careful. Be careful, because this ties in with the notion of, remember, decision-making, concentration, and unselfish action. So what was your belief? What should you believe in? How your belief should be guided? And according to that belief, how should your action be looked at? Who is looking at your action? And the way you act eventually is the way you become. So you see, if you take it in reverse, and sometimes you say, sometime you determine, sometime you observe, and you say, oh my God, this individual is acting like an animal. Well, where did that come from? Well, he was acting like an animal because that's what he became. He was manifesting that as a basis of his action, because this is what his guiding factor was, his belief. So that's why you need to be able to handle your thoughts before you act. And before you act, know that this action will determine whether you will be either benefited from it or you will earn destruction from it. Destruction, exactly right. There's only two things. It's either you benefit or you don't benefit. And when you don't benefit, it can be zero or it can be negative, meaning destruction. So there is a whole science behind it related to that. Now, let's come to some of the foundational spiritual practice related to thoughts and exercise of the mind, related to connecting with the spirit. And I'm going to use as a framework the holy and sacred teachings of Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the details that he gave related to that kind of function. So, you know, our beloved Imam has said that when you are free, when you are not engaged into other material things, you must turn your thoughts. Follow carefully what the Imam says. You must turn your thoughts to this question. What is the question? Who is the creator? And what is the creation? Have you ever thought about these matters, the Imam says? For instance, what would you say if you were asked, who are you? You might say, I am so-and-so. I am the son of so-and-so. The most you might be able to reach back several generations. Several generations A more thinking person might name Adam as his first ancestor, but he will not be able to proceed further. Are you following what the Imam is saying? So you must ask yourself, the Imam says, where did Adam come from? That man who asked this kind of question, the Imam says he's a mystic. It's a mystical type of thinking. And such an individual will be able to capture this kind of thoughts. Okay? So, having said that, an important consideration here is in regards to this, in making connection with the spirit. Okay? In making connection with the spirit, in seeking to make connection, you must remember the reason to make connection has to be there. If you don't have a reason or a purpose, then it's not going to motivate you. So what's the motivation? What's the reason for wanting to connect with the spirit? Now, before I go any further, I want to make a distinction here. Ask yourself right now, what are you connected to? You might say, I'm connected with the outer world. In other words, my body and whatever is outside of me, this outer world, it's one kind of dynamics, one kind of relationship, and what kind of interaction. And then there is my mind related to my body, and then through the interactions with the world outside, right? So when I'm saying to you that what should motivate you, what is motivating you connection right now in the outside world? And then what's motivating you to withdraw yourself from the outside world, from the physical world, distance yourself? How? Shut your eyes, shut the senses, and basically say to yourself, I am at this moment separating myself by closing my eyes. Because you see, when you close your eyes, what happens? The physical world, the outside world, suddenly becomes shut. Now, it doesn't mean you have disconnected your senses, not yet. But shutting your eye has distanced you now from the physical thing. Whatever is physical out there is now blocked. It can't come inside. So now where are you when you close that? You are at the level of your mind. Your mind is still going on. So you realize that you are not part of that physical at that moment, because you have separated, or if you like, you have used the power of your will or decision making to say, I am distancing myself, I am separating myself from the physical realm. So it means you have disconnected from the physical realm, but now you are even more connected in the realm of your mind. So now your connection is mental. And what's happening in your mind? That all depends what movie your mind is playing at that moment. Is it memories of the past? Is it something that you got right now before you shut your eyes, something that you saw that's still in your mind? All of that comes into play. So now the fact that you are disconnected with the physical world, you are purposefully, willfully wanting to connect with something inside of you. And you are saying to yourself, where should my mind give focus to right now? And you say, well, maybe I allow my mind to say some prayers. Maybe I allowed my mind to think about something that is non-physical. But you are asking yourself that if I am not in the physical realm, I am now into my mental realm, in the realm of my mind. But who is doing and who is witnessing what's happening in your mind? Because you've shut the physical. So there must be something there that is witnessing, that is looking at his thoughts, that is experiencing these thoughts. It's not the mind, because the mind itself simply is replaying this. So who is looking at it? Who's experiencing it? That is what we call chit. That is that inner instrument of yours. That is your consciousness, your awareness. And this chit, this awareness, is indeed your Atma. But you see, you realize it only as an act of thinking, and you are able to reason it out because the physical world is kind of shut, but your mental realm needs a point of concentration. So you go back inside yourself, say, who is watching my thoughts? Who is witnessing the experiences of my thought? And you might say, well, it's I, but not I, the ego. It is I, that chit, that Peer is mentioning in the Gnan. So you need to have that consciousness. And that consciousness is actually the reason for that spiritual connection. So, having said that, what's the motivation? The motivation, according to our Ismaili Tariqa, is what? Essence. Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to quote the mystic Mansur al-Hallaj, where the Imam says, Mansur used to say, I shall not rest till I taste the essence. Till then, I shall always strive ahead. Because the Imam says, Mullah Bapa teaches us, what is the use of anything indeed until and unless the origin, the essence has become known? So now I'm asking you this question. Are you interested to know the essence? You see, connecting with the spirit is indeed the gateway to seeking to know and understand this essence, without which, let me tell you, the human life is no different than the life of an animal. However refined we may be, however well we may be living, however we may be in whatever sense that we call ourselves civilized in the material world and all of that has animal tendencies from one end, from the lower spectrum to the higher spectrum, but still animal. And you know, this is the reason why Maula Ali sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to say that he who knows himself knows God. If you translate that, it means if you come to know your spirit, then you will know God. You have to know yourself. Connecting with the spirit is knowing yourself. And once you know that, meaning that witness, that consciousness, once you realize that, then you will know your creator. Remember the question Imam asked in the beginning? Who is the creator? What is creation? That's it. That's there. It's part of that essence. So I have to basically say to you this. Are you interested? You know, you watch the movies of the world, meaning your participation in the material world, your participation, in your body-mind complex. What do I mean by that? You see that witness inside you, this Atma, that soul inside you, you are directing it to experience what's out there through your body and mind complex. But that is exactly what animals do. They are part of the material world, and we are no different. So now, are you going to redirect your thinking through proper decision making and through exercising the power of your concentration, power of decision making, to say, well, you know what? I know I have a life in the material world, but I want to know my spiritual world, my spiritual connection. I have my material connection very easily. This material connection is through my body-mind, but what about my spiritual connection? So in order to make that jump, if you like, you have to be in love with this saying, he who knows himself knows God. So the point here is that you have to say to yourself, like the Imam says, this is a teaching in our tariqah, okay? Remember this. This is not like something you pick up here and there. This is the teaching that our tariqah teaches us about connecting with the spirit. And our beloved Imam teaches us and says that you must constantly strive to see the spirit. See, you are used to see with the eyes, right? Yes? We use the eyes to see this, to see that, to experience that, to experience that. It's an experience to see, to touch, to smell, to hear, to taste. They are all antennas, they are all radars, they are all the outer post of the mind to gain experience through the body-mind complex about the world. You need all of these to gain experience about the world. Yes? I don't think anybody is disputing that. But then, why don't you use the same zeal and enthusiasm? You know what I say? Zeal and enthusiasm is like, you suddenly decide and say, hey, you know what? We haven't seen this and that. Let's go and see it. You get into your car, you get onto your bike, or you decide to walk, or you decide to take a plane. Let's go there. Let's see it, meaning let's experience it. Let's go and become aware. Let's go and become informed. What is that? Why can you not do that about the spirit? You see, the idea is you must constantly strive to see the spirit. Our beloved Imam say, your aim should always be to reach the spirit, not merely to obtain a feeling of pleasure through your prayers or ibadat. Many people, when they sit in ibadat, they seek a sense of pleasure. No, the Imam says, no. That is not enough. Seek to see the spirit. And there are examples which the Imam has often given. And we'll come back to this notion of spirit in a second. And he says that over the ages, Imam Sultan Muhammad alayhi salam declares, only a few select have been able to rise to these heights. Think about this. Jesus the Prophet Muhammad, Pir Shams, only these few and others were able to realize this goal. They all had the same dominant impulse. Underline this concept, dominant impulse. They were all passionately in love with the Spirit. They were friends of the Spirit, and so they were able to reach this sanctuary. Let's analyze it a bit more. What is your dominant impulse? Even though you live in the world, you work in the world, you earn in the world, you interact in the world, is that your dominant impulse? Do you understand the concept of having a dominant impulse? Remember what I said to you earlier on about the mind? That if your negative emotions are dominant, you'll be blown away in that negative way. So what is it that's dominating your impulse to be into this material world? Eating, sleeping, procreating, enjoying the material realm, enjoying the dynamics of your body-mind complex, having the pleasure of sleep, waking up, back into the world, let that will go through, and all that the physical, materialistic world has to offer has become the spider's web where you have been caught in it, and that becomes your dominant impulse. Do you have the ability to take charge of that impulse and basically said, wait a minute, I am not here just for this. I also need to find the same motivation, the same impulse, so that I can passionately be in love with the Spirit. You know these words the Imam is using? Passionately. What are you passionate about? Some people are passionate about food. Some people are passionate about traveling. Some people are passionate about reading. Some people are passionate about being with people. All that is the material aspect of our love and passion. Are you passionate about your spirit? Please think about this. Please think. Because there is a magic in being passionate. You know, when we say being passionate, what does it mean? Passionate means that you are seeking to want to be just that. Be energetic about it. You are raising the level of your energy to a different standard, to a different level of capture. So you have to be passionate. Look, the simple example you can take is if you're passionate about food, you will be able to taste all the ingredients and all the things that are happening in the consumption of the food. If you're passionate about reading, every word, every sentence, every concept will make sense to you because you're passionate about the subject that you are reading or the subject that you are learning. In other words, this notion of passion is a very powerful force and energy in the human being that allows the human being to concentrate his energy and his direction in achieving that. Yes, indeed. So are you passionate about the Spirit? You see, if you're not passionate, what happens? Everything to do with the body, everything else to do with the mind is right there. body, mind, mind, body, body, mind, body. Nothing about your Atma, nothing about your Ruh, nothing about your spirit. What was the point? What was the point? This is why learning to connect with your spirit is fundamentally important. So you have to basically say to yourself that this connection with the spirit is actually a foundational exercise that needs to be carried on, without which you will not be able to reach that sanctuary that the Holy Imam is basically speaking about. Now, look, there are other things that our beloved Imam has said, and we have to understand this in the highest spiritual form. And what is that? Our beloved Imam has clarified and said, paradise is nothing but an image of this world. Okay? He's trying to make a distinction between the notion of spirit and this paradise. Ask most people, where do you want to go? They say, paradise. Paradise is promised to the faithful. Paradise is promised to the virtuous, to the pure, and so on. Our tariqah says, through the teachings of our beloved Imam, that paradise too is nothing but an image of this world. Are you following me? This physical world is a very, very dim photocopy of what paradise is all about. So paradise, the Imam says, it's an image of this world. That's why you hear about all those great gifts about people get in paradise. But the Imam continues and says, the yearning of the spirit is another matter altogether. Now, before I continue, where am I with my subject? I am at a point where I am continuing to discourse or to dialogue with you to make you realize that to have yearning for the spirit, to have this dominant impulse to want to know your spirit is fundamentally what is at the root and at the core of our own tariqah, and what our tariqah expects of the individual if they are in search of this spiritual experience. Okay? Not paradisal experience, not the experience of the world through your body-mind complex, the experience of the spirit. So, do you have that dominant impulse? Do you? Only you can tell. And if you don't, then there is search and research to be done on your part. Are you yearning for the spirit? You know, the word yearning is very important here. Yearning refers to what? It is an intense desire, intense want. It's like an individual basically saying that I really want it. I absolutely want it. Nothing else matters. This is what I want. What are you going to say? What are you going to say? And we do this in a material world, don't we? I would say to you here, now the fact that if you have yearning for the spirit, and you may not be able to get there just like that, do you throw a tantrum? You know, the 6-year-old or the adult who has not been fully matured is an adult, and they may be 40, 50, even 60 years old, and they're not mature. They throw up a tantrum when they don't get their material satisfaction. They complain. They will raise havoc when they don't get what they need to get materially to satisfy their physical and mental predisposition? Do you throw a tantrum when you are not able to achieve that which is part of the spirit? Do you? And what are the elements that you need to engage in to be able to do so? So, I will, I just mentioned a couple of things because I can go on with it for a while. And when I'm going to, I think it will be necessary for me to have a second lecture because I want to complete this in the next 3 or 4 minutes. Because just for your information, and you should pass this information around, my team and I have decided that when I start these lectures on Monday, they start at 1 p.m. and we will finish at 3 p.m. And then nothing stops us continuing, but we leave time for questions and answers. So maybe we'll have a little lesser time today for Q&A because we have a second lecture on this continuation of this topic. So please pass the word around that connecting with the spirit part 2 will happen next Monday. But for now, let me just continue. So look at part of the teachings of our beloved Imam, okay? Again, this is all intended to motivate you to create this dominant impulse and the yearning for the spirit, okay? So our beloved Imam, many, many, many decades ago, he said, look at the teaching, look at the beautiful teaching of the Imam. He says, a human being is one that wishes to attain higher spiritual life. So let me stop right here. Are you making the connection? This lecture is all about connection, connecting the spirit, connecting to the spirit, and taking a practical approach. So look at this sentence from the Imam. A human being is one that wishes to attain the higher spiritual life. Now ask yourself, am I a human being? Yes. Why do you say you're a human being? Because I have a human body. I have a physical human body. I don't have an animal body. So I call myself a human being. And then, look what the Imam says. Without this yearning, a human is not any different than an animal. Do you see the element that makes the human different than an animal? Which is that element? Yearning. Without this yearning, our beloved Imam says, there's no difference between a human being and an animal. An animal cannot yearn. Human being can yearn. I'll have more to say about this quality in my lecture number 2. And I wasn't in a hurry to complete it today because this is a very foundational topic, a very important topic. So, the beloved Imam says, without this yearning, a human is not any different than an animal. So what does the Imam teach us? What does our faith teaches us? It is desirable for the soul to reach its original abode. It is desirable for the soul to reach its original abode. Then our tariqah teaches the spirituality by saying, such should not happen. Remember this, our tariqah says in the teachings of the Imam, such should not happen that your souls remain trapped on this earth and you be satisfied by merely eating and sleeping like animals. Are you following this? The soul can get trapped. just like you are trapped into a prison. But what happens if you have not achieved that liberation? The soul can't come out. It will remain trapped. It won't be in the physical body. It won't be in the spiritual realm. It will be trapped in between the physical and the spiritual. The soul gets trapped. And when that soul gets trapped, oh my goodness me. You can't go here, you can't go there. This is a tragedy. It's a tragedy. So do you see? Am I able to emphasize this in the strongest term to you? That do you see that the idea of the spirit isn't like many unfortunately misguided people think, that it's okay not to pay attention to it? Because the day will come, your physical body will cease. You know that. Then what happens? The spirit will depart. And then what? Will it be trapped? Or will it reach some level whereby you have access to that spiritual realm or spiritual world? Because the Imam once gave an example. You know, he said, when the soul does not reach its destination sooner. You know what example the Imam gave? Our beloved Imam gave the example, and he said, you can see that the rivers of Kutch do not merge with the ocean. Now, you know, this was, of course, what our beloved Imam explained to the Jamaat in the Indian subcontinent at the time when the Imamat was very active at that time with the Jamaat. Now, remember, Kutch is one of the towns and one of the localities where huge Jamaat used to live and still live today in the state of Gujarat. So Kutch has a river, and the Imam uses the simile, the example of this particular river, who, because of the way it flowed, it often dried on its way to the ocean. The river actually never reached the ocean. So Imam says you can see that the rivers of Kutch do not merge with the ocean. During their course, they all dry up. Then the Imam gives the powerful simile. In the same way, those who are not courageous and determined, look at the word the Imam is using, those who are not courageous and determined are like the rivers of Kutch that have evaporated on their way. The soul is like a river, the Imam says. Maulana Bapa tells us the soul is like that river. And he says, do not allow it to evaporate during its journey. We are into the journey right now, are we not? And then the soul of people, listen to this, the soul of people who have determination and courage will merge with the divine ocean much, much sooner. Are you following my humble presentation to you that connecting with the spirit has the underlying spiritual knowledge that the soul merges in the divine ocean much, much sooner. But you must have courage and determination. Okay. I think I'm going to stop here so that we respect our timing. But perhaps I'll make one quick note related to the aspect of the mind, just backtracking just a little bit. And that had to do with, remember, when I was mentioning that negative, toxic thoughts creates negative emotion, right? So I've come 360, but I'm going back to some initial practical application. Okay, so this is my last aspect for today, related to the mind, in case you are looking for a way. Okay, now there are a number of things I need to say, but just very quickly, without going deeper into the subject itself. When it comes to the stabilization, and remember what I said, there are three things: power of concentration, the power of decision making, and unselfish action. In order to achieve strength in exercising that in the right way, without the sound is not going to happen. Okay? The sound is necessary. The sound is the glue with creation and the creator. Remember this. The sound is the glue. Now, if you unglue yourself, you'll be all over the place. Nothing will happen. The sound is the glue, right? And the prayers that we recite every day is basically the energy that you are putting in the exercise of these choices: power of concentration, decision making, and unselfish action. Now, in practice, I'll come back to this subject next week in part 2. There's a lot more to be said about the soul and its connection. So, but today I want you to be able to remain focused and concentrated on this last part. Come and generate new thoughts. Don't go into your old thoughts. When you see an old thought, especially thoughts that come from this toxic category, because these toxic thoughts, remember, toxic thoughts create negative emotion. So you want to change those thoughts, change them to positive thoughts. What's that positive thoughts? Positive thoughts will lead you to new choices. Okay? Not all those old choices that you have that are the compulsive habits. Remember that. New thoughts leads to new choices, which should lead you to new behaviors. Remember the notion of acting in the end of the day? As you believe, so you act. As you act, so you become. You don't want that to be of the old thoughts. New thoughts brings you new choices, that brings you new behavior, that should lead to new behavior, because if you have new thoughts, right, new thoughts will drive you to have a new behavior. And this new behavior will lead you to new experiences. This is practical, okay? New experiences. You have to experience it. When you have a new thought, it's a new experience. When you change, a food to another one, that new food that you eat will give you a new experience in your taste and in the overall way you get satisfied or not with that food. So new experiences will lead to new emotions. Do you see the connection? Toxic thought, negative emotions. Positive thought, which is the new emotions, positive emotions. And these positive emotions, these new emotions, takes you back into the cycle of new thoughts, because the emotion is positive. Or if it's otherwise, then you know what it is. And you come back to the power of decision making, the power of concentration, and always take a measure Is my action selfish or is it unselfish? That will determine a lot in that progress. Stopping here for today, and we will have, inshallah, part 2 next week. I have a lot more to say about the notion of the spirit and the soul. And remember, I constantly tell you, my focus into my presentations is intended to bring to light the way in which our tariqah and how Maula Bapa guides us in order for us to be able to achieve the experience of the spirit. Thank you, Zahir.
Thank you very much, Dr. H. That was just astounding. When you did this presentation for Anand Ankara, and then now you expanded it, and now it needs a part 2. And absolutely, because the steps that you are laying down for us, I am sure participants are taking that in. This is concrete information that one can practice in order to connect with the spirit. So Dr. H, that was wonderful. What I wanted to do is maybe just go back to our audience today, our participants. We've had about 350 joining us today from all parts of the world, so really welcome. What I thought is we would go to question and answer. We have some raised hands, and so I thought maybe we will first go to perhaps Zul and Mobina Vishram. They've raised their hands. So Zul, if you can turn your video on and unmute yourself, that would be very good. Zul and Mobina?
Thank you very much. I wanted to know a little bit more about, I understand regarding the yearning. It comes from our soul and it's all to do with our practices. But also, when you say that, just an example, like animals, according to the other teachings, the animals also do bow to the Creator, which we know.
Yes.
Also, they give, example, cows, chickens, they give. So what can you say more about how should we even learn from them?
Now remember one thing. The difference between human being and an animal is this. Animals do not have free will like humans have. Animals are instinctual by nature. So there is an instinct that Allah gives them, and they follow that animal instinct, and in following their animal instinct, they remain submitted to the divine will. It's a very important question you raised. I will take it, hopefully, if my time's permit next week, add on to this. The fact is this: there is the notion of divine will, and there is the notion of the human will, as opposed to the notion of we call it animal will, but actually animals don't have a will, because remember, the notion of will is to be able to choose. The notion of the will is to be able to choose. Animals don't choose. They follow their natural instinct. Now, on the other hand, there is divine will, which is absolute. But within that absolute, the human being has been given a very limited will, if you like, I would say very limited free will. And within that limited free will, now remember what was the will? The ability to choose. Here the human can choose between the right and the wrong, to choose to be with the absolute, which is the divine will, or to choose to be with his human will. And remember, in the Holy Quran, there is this offer that Allah made. Allah says in the Holy Quran, He offered this will to the mountains and animals and the trees and the birds and so on. And guess what? The whole creation said, no, 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 no. We don't want it. We just want to remain submitted to you, Lord, which is what the meaning of Islam is, right? Submission to the divine will. But the Quran says, the verses says, the human being in his haste, you see the word haste here? In his haste and foolishness, he said to God, give it to me. We will take that free will. And Allah said in the Quran, human being was foolish. And you see now, the human being, either you can be in harmony with divine will, or if you are not, then you suffer. This is the reason why the foundation of Islam is submission to the divine will. And I may speak more about it next week, but I want to remind you of a particular quotation from a mystic that says, recognize the force of divine will and be quiet. You have to be spiritually mature to know that.
Exactly.
You have to be spiritually mature. Otherwise, you will think, oh, well, we are like puppets in a chain. No, that's not what it means. But you have to first reach that stage whereby you even intellectually begin to say, what does it mean? Recognize the force of divine will and be quiet. Now, let me give you a quick example. Have you seen, let's take a small example. Have you seen an insect fly? Maybe take a fly and you observe the fly and you say to yourself two things. There are two avenues. You can say, where's the fly swatter? Let me kill that fly and get rid of it, because we have this thing about flies, right? But let's say your sense of observation and curiosity wakens up and you say, oh my God, look at this fly. It goes from this direction to that direction to that direction, up and down. And if I try even to catch it, it's a difficult exercise to catch, and it goes up and down, left and right, north and south, east and west. Can you possibly name any kind of machine a human being has created that can do that? Name it. We cannot. No machine can imitate the fly. Of course, we have helicopters and we have planes, but you think it can do what a fly does? If a plane does what a fly does, a plane will break apart and kill people. Have you seen this tiny little bloodsucker, this mosquito that goes here and there? Go sometime in the park, go sometime in the woods, see this insect. Have you wondered, where does the fly get its ability, its power, its means in flying around like that and not banging in a wall or in the window? Where does the fly get its radar so that it won't even be caught by the human being except by deceit? So you put a glue board or you spray some insecticide and the fly gets trapped. Do you see? We exercise our reason that way, but we can't even build what a fly does, leave alone other animals. And I'm going to come to that hopefully next week in some by giving you some practical, concrete example, because if you are to connect with the spirit, you basically have to realize that our free will, which is the question you ask in a sense, is basically very, very, very minuscule, and we can't just think, that we are in charge. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Dr. Racha. We have quite a few questions on the chat, and quite a few raised hands, and perhaps we have just about 10 minutes to go, so we can maybe time them through. I'm just going to ask some of the short questions on chat, and then maybe after that go to a raised hand. So on the chat, the question was, which Imam said about the rivers not opening, not going into the ocean, not emptying into the ocean?
Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah.
Amen.
And Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah, I think it was in 1904, when
Yes.
he gave such example to the Jamaat.
And then to follow up on that was, how do you develop courage and determination so that we are able to see the spirit? I'm not quite sure what that question is, but I sense that it is, how do you connect with it again?
Yes. Well, you see, the notion of courage and determination, this is a particular feature and gift given to the human being. The notion of courage and determination is exactly when a mu'min, a murid of the Imam, decides and says, I will change my ways. I will change my ways. Meaning, I may say more prayers. I will not let the world dictate my dominant impulse. What I will do, I will seek to find a way to try to come closer and closer to my Imam. How do I do this? By correcting my action, by correcting my thinking, by remaining in the path that the Imam is asking us to follow, meaning obedience to his holy farmans in the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim. Do you have the courage to do that? Or is it going to be, oh, well, I can follow this, but not that, selective determination? No, no. Courage and determination comes when you allow yourself to have made that decision and you recognize what that path is. That means in recognizing the path, you recognize who the holy Imam of the time is. If you recognize the Imam, recognition of the Imam is a fundamental root and principle and core aspect of our determination and courage to be in Sirat al-Mustaqim. Because being in the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim will indeed clear the path. We will not dry up like the river of Kutch. So, the answer is follow strictly, and I mean the word strictly, the teachings, the holy farmans of the Imam, without deviating. And in that, follow the knowledge the holy peers have given us in our ginans, in our qasidas, in our mankabats, in our masnavis, those that are related to the teaching of Satpant, the path of truth. The path of truth. Satpant means Sirat al-Mustaqim. If you stay on it, you will feel and gain and get that courage and determination.
Thank you, Dr. H. I also, from the yearning, you talk about that if the yearning is there, the courage and determination comes from the yearning, as I understood you to say. The other two quick questions on chat, and then I'll go to Shamira, who's got her hand up. So the quick questions on chat were very in short. Just elaborate quickly on CHIT, C-H-I-T, that you mentioned, and also examples of positive emotions. I think the two might go hand in hand.
I'm going to leave the notion of CHIT for next week's lecture because I need 10 to 15 minutes to explain specifically based on our ginans, like the ginan that was recited today by Salma, where the concept of CHIT is mentioned, And you know, we also have another Gnan, Sat Chit Anand. It begins with that, or there is a verse in that. And this meaning of Sat Chit Anand, you have to understand them in their various layers. Okay. And that's why I want to leave it for next week, so I don't give you half the stuff. So the second one was related to
examples of some positive emotions.
Positive emotion. Now, where do you get positive emotion? It comes indeed from the ability for you to make the right choices using the power of your reason. Okay? Emotions are not just going to come just like that. And when they do, you have the power of your reason and decision making to decide, do you want that or not? So the most powerful source of positive emotions are in the Farmans and the Ginans. You know why I say that? I haven't said much about Ginans today. I will say next week. But Ginan is loaded with these positive emotions. So now, if you take time to listen to the Ginan purposefully, where you say, let me learn a word, let me learn a concept, let me learn what our holy peers are teaching here. Now, let me give a very concrete example. In the Holy Ginans, in the Farmans, our Imam says, our Holy Peer says, those who drink Abe Safa, which is the Nur, their tongue is never involved in foul language and in lying. So now I ask a question. Are you an unfortunate victim or promulgator of foul language or saying lies? Use your reason to say, oh my God, I'm drinking Niyaz in Khane. Mola Bapa gives us Niyaz to drink. How can I, with the same mouth, say those things? Are you understanding me? I want you to take it very practically, because if you don't, there'll be philosophical clouds around it. That's not what we would like to do. The same thing happens with other practices that we have, which we can go into details. For example, how do you generate positive emotion in the construct of your action? Are you familiar that when you receive sukrit in Jamaat Khana, you see the very word sukrit? What su means good in Sanskrit. Krit means action. Sukrit means good action. Remember the flow I told you? If you have good action, there'll be positive experience, then there'll be positive emotions, right? And the symbolism that goes with the sukrit that we receive in Khane is completely inundated with that meaning. Kir, Khan, Grat, Amrat, Bhojan, the ingredients that makes up the sukrit. So if you know the meaning of those ingredients, what do they mean? Apply them in your life, because you're going to say, oh my goodness me, what does this sukrit means? I'm eating it. What kind of behavior should I have? This is what I mean. More next week, inshallah.
Thank you, Dr. H. That was just very incisive. I can't wait till next week myself in terms of the elaboration on chit. Well, Dr. H, we're almost at 3. We still have over 320 people with us, which is great. I thought we would take this time, just maybe 5 minutes more, just one more question from Shamira, who's had her hand up. And to the others, if you could post your questions in chat, Sally, Yasmin, and Kamuruddin Leela, then we'd be happy to get Dr. H to answer them, maybe in the next session or in our Q&A sessions. So Dr. H, I'm just going to ask Shamira to unmute and ask her question.
To HASSAM, Yali
Yeah.
Madat. Actually, you kind of partly already have answered my question regarding the positiveness, but my question is slightly twofold. What I wanted to say, okay, if we want to relearn or learn the connection to our soul, so by being mindful that because we automatically go to work, get up, do the usual things, in the evening we say dua, but maybe are you saying that we need to question the actions we do from the information we get and then decide which is the best option? For example, going for a walk, and sometimes you think, oh, I'd rather watch a movie, for example, but then you question what is the goodness of going for a walk and why we should do that. To some degree, that's my understanding. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, when you say that we need to look after others, but isn't it the case that you need to be able to look after yourself, so in order to share with others? Maybe I haven't put it correctly, that you need to be able to be yourself correctly, looking after yourself. So because you are well, you're able to share or help somebody else out.
Yes. Both of your approaches are sound and logical, and they are good. And it resonates with decision making. And it is true. You have to be to some degree be stable, so you can help others become stable, so to speak. But remember, although these examples may be anecdotal, the point, the principle behind that is this: when we talk about unselfish action, there is a context, and the context is this. The context is that it is opposite of greed. You understand? It's opposite of greed. And it is opposite of evil. For example, if I say that, oh, I can profit by doing this, but that is your business if you lose or get a loss. As long as I profit, I'm okay. That's greed. That is a selfish action. That is against Islam. It's against our faith. It is one of those toxic actions from the group of toxic thoughts. They will give rise to negative emotions and so on. So what I'm saying is, when sometime you have to make a decision, remember, hold fire and think and said, if I do this, is it going to be harmful to somebody? Is it going to be beneficial to me and to somebody? Is this going to cause any kind of anxiety, distress, or something to somebody? If the answer is yes, then that's a selfish action. It's a selfish action. Then you have to say to yourself, there is the element of divine will too. And sometimes you have to say to yourself, you know what? If I do this, somebody is going to get upset, somebody will have anxiety, somebody will have this or that. And you said, I don't think I want to do this. So you stay away from it. On the other hand, if you find somebody in distress, you find somebody in need, you find somebody who needs assistance, then don't wait for them to beg. Reach out. If you know. And by reaching out, you may well say to that person, I see you're in distress. Is there any way I can try to help? And in doing that, what happens? Let me explain some part of the mechanics. Do you think it's the individual eventually that's going to get to the point or solve that? No, it's divine will. You are simply a conduit. You simply become a instrument in the hand of the divine because you reached out, just as the divine will reaches out to fulfill its task, its objective, and so on. So you become an instrument. But how can you become an instrument if everything is shut in you? You have to open. You have to open up. You have to say, I have nothing to lose by reaching out. And if I was to lose a little because I'm reaching out to somebody and it's helping them, well, it's worth it. Because what I have is by divine grace and divine will. And divine grace and divine will not let me lose. So I reach out. I know it takes a certain intellectual and spiritual maturity to function in those parameters. But it is when the human being says, oh, no, you know, if I do this, I'll have less. If I do this, I'll expose myself. If I do this, I'll be that. If I do that. You know, in other words, you are now exercising your own will, your own decision-making. Fine. Then there are consequences. But if you say, you know what? My faith tells me, my tariqah tells me, the teachings of my imam tells me, go out of your way to help somebody. What concept is that?
Wow, Dr. H, that's an amazing answer. I'm sure Shamira will be very happy with that one. As I said, it's now way past 3 and people in the UK are beginning to. So Dr. H, that was a wonderful session. Amazing concrete examples. I mean, just the fact that you think of this fly in the forest and what makes it work. It is, when you really think about it, that really gets to the essence of it. So Dr. H, we love this presentation. Inshallah, for next Monday, you will do second part. And in the meantime, I wanted to ask you, as our special saying goodbye, to please bless us with your prayers today.
May Mola Bapa bless everyone with happiness, with barakat,
Amen.
with good health,
Amen.
to be strong on the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim.
Amen.
Mola Bapa, protect your faith, your iman, and make it stronger day by day.
Amen.
May you be strong, very strong, in the understanding and the action and the submission of your dasand.
Amen.
May that bring you barakat.
Amen.
May that bring you happiness and multiplication in the spiritual and the material world.
Amen.
May you feel the presence of Mola Bapa in front of you. Every step, every breath, in everything that you do.
Amen.
May Mola Bapa give you the knowledge, the courage, the determination, the impetus to feel his presence and to make the connection with him.
Amen.
And may you feel happiness, joy, abundance, prosperity in the remembrance of the Holy Imam and in that connection.
Amen.
And may Mola Bapa protect you from any calamity, any difficulties, any kind of challenges and obstacles.
Amen.
And may Mola open the path for the full and complete realization of all your amazing, good, spiritual and material wishes and aspirations. And Allah bless you with his holy Nurani Dita. Ameen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Dr. H. Dr. H, before we sign off, maybe you can share with us that last slide, which shows the upcoming seminars and sessions we'll be doing, and a brief look at those. But I understand that next Monday we'll be definitely doing part 2 of the presentation we did today. So there are, as Dr. H brings up that slide, just to let you know that we will continue these series right through till December, of course. And the one that I'm really looking forward to is, as today, the connection between the mind, body, and the spirit. So these are some of the future lecture series on Mondays. The Mind series, what we've been talking about, Allah's Creation series, the Holy Ginan Education series, which I definitely, for one, really look forward to, Fundamental Principle series of Imamat, Nabuwat, Spirit, Matter, and Mud. And, as going along, we do Ismaili Literature Review series, and of course, many more to come. So thank you very, very, very much, Dr. H, for your time today. We're most appreciative. And on behalf of all our 315 participants, I want to thank you for being with us for this session and for sharing your knowledge with us. If I may take this last few minutes just to say dua for you, it will be a privilege. So may Bola bless you with great health.
Amen.
May he grant you and your family peace in your hearts.
Amen.
May he bless you with a special barakat to continue to share your enormous knowledge with us.
Amen.
May he give you continued strength to share knowledge with us that will light up our path to make the connections to the Spirit.
Amen.
May he grant you happiness, joy, peace, and focus of mind, and unity in your family.
Amen.
May he reward you for all this incredible seva you and your family do for our Jamaat worldwide.
Amen.
And for bringing words of wisdom, words of knowledge, words of peace, words of opening the heart, and today sharing with us the steps that will allow us to polish our souls so as to ease our journey as we try and make this connection to the Spirit.
Amen.
So thank you again, Dr. H. And from Vancouver participants on this sunny, hot day, we say goodbye and Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you for hosting Zahir with all the team members. May all the prayers come back to you too.
Amen.
And all the team members. Mola
Amen.
fulfill all your wishes.
Amen.
And Mola accept your seva.
Amen.
And Mola bless you with barakat in this world and the next. Amen. And Yalimadad to everyone.
Mola Alimadad, and happy again Imamat Day to all of us.
Yalimadad.
Goodbye from Vancouver. I'm going to now close the session.